In this video, I'll explain the formal lifecycle involved in handling a Java Server Faces request. As a Java Enterprise Edition developer, you'll become very familiar with lifecycles. You should already be familiar with the servlet lifecycle. A servlet is instantiated once and initialized, then it handles many requests until it is destroyed by the web server. Understanding the Java Server Faces lifecycle will help you master development in Java Server Faces. The lifecycle is fully defined in the Java Server Faces specifications. This is a simplified version of the full lifecycle. I'd like to look at the initial request first. When the user requests a view and isn't posting back any data, the lifecycle is very simple. First, Faces restores the view. For an initial request, it just creates an empty view. Then it renders the response. When rendering the response, it will first fill the view with all the components defined in the facelets file. Once it has loaded all the components, each component will then call the getters in your backing beans to generate HTML to send to the user. So this is pretty simple. The post-back process is much more complex. In the first step, it restores the component tree that was created when the view was first rendered. Next is apply request values. JSF asks each component to decode their request parameters from the submitted form data. So for example, an input text will look in the submitted form values for the new value of the text. It doesn't do anything with it yet. It doesn't update the backing bean. All it does is retrieve the values from the posted data and stores them temporarily inside the component. Next is process validations. JSF will perform all validation checks. If something went wrong, then the application will jump right to the render response to tell the user that an error occurred, that something they entered was invalid or missing. Now, at this point, the data has been loaded and JSF has verified that it is valid. So JSF can now update the model values. The values are written back to the backing bean. So in other words, this is where Java Server Faces calls the setters on your backing bean. The next phase is invoke application. In this phase, it processes the application level events. This is when the action on your command button that you clicked will get called. After the action has been performed, it finally renders the result. Because the view was restored in the first stage, it doesn't need to create the components again. Instead, it moves directly to each component, then the components call getters on your backing beans and generate the HTML output for the user. If the outcome of the action resulted in navigation to a different page, then instead of rendering the current page, this render response phase would have rendered that other view. At the moment, the lifecycle may seem rather abstract, however it is important to keep in mind. You should now be able to look at code such as this and understand which methods of your backing bean are called and when. When the user clicks on the button, the form data is posted back, and we now know that even though the command button appears earlier in the file, the setText method is called first. This is because setters are called during the update model values phase, while actions are called during the invoke application phase that occurs later. One phase I haven't spoken much about yet is validation. In Java EE, validation is a very powerful and convenient feature. Java comes with many validation annotations, and you can also write your own validators. All you need to do is add an annotation to the getters on your backing bean. Faces will ensure that your input is validated before it is saved to the backing bean. So, for example, all you need to do to ensure that a user enters some text in the task field is to annotate the task getter, the getTask method, with size min equals 1. It tells Java Server Faces that the minimum size is 1. And you can control how the error message is displayed using the Java Server Faces hMessage or hMessages component. I'd like to conclude with a few tips that will make Java Server Faces programming easier. In Java Server Pages, expression language uses the dollar symbol. But when writing expression language in Faces, always use the hash symbol. Try to keep views self-contained and single purpose. Don't try and make mega views that show different things based on different conditions. Don't fight the technology. If something isn't working, if you're struggling with Java Server Faces, then you may be using the technology in a way it wasn't designed for. Java Server Faces is easy and it is powerful if you use it in the way it was designed to be used. If you try to make it work like something else, such as JSP or servlets, then you'll have all sorts of problems. Finally, avoid the JSP standard tag library in Faces code. You'll find that it seems to work and your IDE might even automatically suggest it in autocomplete. However, the JSP standard tag library does not work with the Faces lifecycle, so you can end up with surprising bugs that don't make sense. Now, this is a very quick and high-level overview of Java Server Faces. There's a lot to take in, so please don't be overwhelmed. You'll come to master it with practice and once you start using it. Perhaps you can watch this video again once you've had a chance to write a bit of Java Server Faces code, and then the lifecycle and why it is important might make more sense to you.